Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. From the Post-Millennial, Joe Biden in his State of the Union address says the threat to democracy must be defended. Messes up Laken O'Reilly's name in a confused, angry State of the Union speech. We must be honest. The threat to democracy must be defended. Arresting people that are aligned with your political opponent and trying to put your political opponent in jail is the biggest threat to democracy. And as far as Laken Riley goes, he called her Lincoln Riley after Marjorie Taylor Greene confronted him during the speech to say her name. First, before we get in the story, let's see what Tucker Carlson has to say.
Good evening and welcome to the Tucker Carlson Network live. Well, that was quite an experience watching that. You know, you think of Joe Biden as a doddering old man, a guy who can't remember when his son died or when he served as vice president. And of course, that's exactly who he is, and it's on display every day. But Joe Biden is also a cruel and vicious demagogue, a man who has no problem at all denouncing his fellow Americans or putting his political opponents in prison as he has done. And that was all on display tonight. That was possibly the darkest, most un-American speech ever given by an American president. In fact, it wasn't a speech. It was a rant, entirely lacking in decency or generosity to his fellow Americans.
Yeah, interesting. Tucker's take is pretty much mine. An angry, bitter politician that wants to divide the country. Say he's a unifier, but actually he's the polar opposite. It was, 40 minutes into the speech before he mentioned the border? Let's read on. Joe Biden's State of the Union address delivered to Congress on Wednesday night was more of like a campaign speech than an address on the condition of the nation under his fourth year of his leadership. In a meandering speech, it really did. He went all over the place. He harped on the same talking points he's delivered since he ran for office in 2020. It's we who face an unprecedented moment in history of the Union. And yes, our purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people. This is no ordinary moment either. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack against home and overseas at the same time. So what he's saying is Putin and all the other dictatorships in the world that are invading other countries and the people that are against him are the same people. It's exactly what that means. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop Ukraine, I'm sure he will not, Biden said, demanding Congress fund this foreign war. Let's hear this nonsense.
My purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare?
Freedom and democracy have not been in assault as they are today since Lincoln and the Civil War. He's comparing the country literally fighting itself with standing armies, over 600,000 Americans dead. If you punched in today's numbers, it would be 6 million. Because we're 10 times bigger than we were in the 1860s as a percent. So the few rioters that actually destroyed something, or the vast majority of them, has wandered through the Capitol January 6th taking selfies, is more of a threat to democracy than today's numbers at 6 million dead, if you want to punch in that. That's what they're saying. The worst thing since 9/11, all they have is Russia, Putin, Trump, January 6th, and Roe v. Wade, and nobody is illegal. That's their entire platform.
Is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time.
Democracy is not under attack here except by the Democrats. Republicans are stopping no one from voting. Republicans are stopping no one from running for public office. The Republicans are not the ones trying to use lawfare to scare off their political rivals, and either that or put them in jail. It's amazing. They're not asking for American soldiers. Well, they're going to be soon. In fact, no American soldiers war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way. You know, it's amazing to me. Here we go with the insurrectionists.
To overturn the will of the people. January 6th lies about the 2020 election and the plots to steal the election posed a gravest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War.
Now, since the Civil War, the fake, every single, let's go back here. Every single Republican that has won the presidency, the Democrats have said openly and on the record that it was illegitimate. They did it with Trump the first time in 2016. They did it with George W. Bush. They did it with Reagan. They did it with every single one. Stood up during the electoral vote count and tried to disrupt the proceedings and say, no, it's illegitimate. Don't count the electors. They've been doing the same thing for years. For years. And by the way, anybody that's out there that think that those few hundred people could overthrow the American government, this is not medieval Europe where you take the castle and now you're the government like the French Revolution. It just doesn't work that way. It's a lie. It's a scam.
War. But they failed. America stood.
Yeah, the little old lady walking around with an American flag and guys just wandering around, many of them looking for the bathroom, was trying to overthrow the government. And not one individual out of all of them, even the ones that caused the damage to the windows and other things, carried a firearm. The only casualty was one of the people in the crowd coming into the Capitol that was shot by a Capitol police officer and died. That's it. It's a lie about the police officers dying. They put one on display at the Rotunda of all things, where presidents and our past leaders and Supreme Court justices lay in state when they pass away. It's insane. It's absurd. And the mainstream media is going right along with it. The officer didn't die because of January 6th. He had a stroke a couple of days later, and I believe another one committed suicide a few days after that. Had nothing to do with January 6th. So that means if a Capitol police officer dies in a car accident after January 6th, that's the insurrectionist's fault too? It's total bullshit. That's all they have.
America stood strong and democracy prevailed.
Stood strong. The people wanted around, then they left. After a lot of the Capitol people let them in the building. You hear some of the audio. We don't go along with it, but we back up your right to do it. It's insane. They wandered around. Yes, there's a few handful, probably a couple dozen that caused damage, and they should go to jail and stay in jail. Make restitution plus jail time. Not a problem. It's a lie. It's a scam. And unfortunately, because of the mainstream media, almost half the country believes it. Let's read on. He peddled the same narrative that's been disproven again and again, saying that those who entered the Capitol on January 6th, they come to stop the peaceful transfer of power over the will of the people. That's a lie. Biden claimed what so many Democrats have said, which is the plot to steal the election posed the greatest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War. It's a lie. Much of what Biden spoke about was how to get more funding for health care, prescription drugs, and abortion. He vowed to federally legalize abortion and brought up his plans to further fund the medical industrial complex by providing more funding for research and lower drug costs. It was 40 minutes before he addressed the border. I do want to say he also mentioned the Dobbs decision, which is the one that overturned Roe v. Wade. They want to overturn that law. There was no abortion national law ever. It was a Supreme Court decision based on flawed premise. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, rest in peace, one of the most liberal judges ever on the Supreme Court, said it was nonsense. It won't hold up. If Congress wants to pass a law legalizing abortion and setting limits on whatever the rules are to have one, then that's what they need to do. And believe me, the Democrats have had the Senate and the House and the presidency several times since Roe v. Wade. And not once have they put forward a bill to legalize abortion in the United States. Period. They don't want to solve the problem. They want the issue. Roe v. Wade was the law of the land. That's a lie. As Biden noted, the primary purpose of the bill was to hire more border agents. Now, this is the border bill that supposedly the Republicans are stopping, and they're the ones that are the problem. $60 billion to Ukraine and $20 billion to Border Patrol enforcement and $60 billion to Ukraine in the same bill. Why is that Ukraine bill attached? And on top of that $20 billion, a very small percent of that goes for actual border agents. The rest of it is for paralegals and lawyers to help with people claiming asylum, which 95% of them are not. That's not real asylum. They just want to live here. And the billions that they're getting in air traffic fairness, they travel around the country for free, put up in hotels for free. Go to James O'Keefe's website. All kinds of they're given cards with thousands of dollars on it. They're living in hotels for free. They're overrunning major cities. That's not even counting that money. Marjorie Taylor Greene confronted him and said, say her name. In fact, he even handed President Biden a Laken Riley pin, say her name. And he brought it up to the podium with him. And he gets up there, and this is what he says. Remember, her name is Laken Riley.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal.
So now he effed up by saying Lincoln Riley, which really pissed off the Republicans. They couldn't even bother to find out what her name was. Her parents were in the audience, I might add. And then he pissed off the progressives in his party when he called the person legal and not undocumented. You know, it takes a special kind of stupid to piss everybody off. Let's read on. It's incredible. On the war in Israel, Biden attempted to walk a fine line between not offending those who support Israel nor those who support Hamas and Palestinians. In practice, he promised more aid to Gaza and Hamas, said U.S. troops would not be on the ground, and demanded there would be a creation of a Palestinian state on Israeli's doorstep. The Palestinians were offered their own state several times in the last several decades, and they've always said no. And by the way, you leftists out there, progressives, riddle me this. Why, when the Palestinian refugees, as they flowed out of Gaza, when in the other Arab countries, look at the border with Egypt. It's like 15-foot tall concrete and barbed wire keeping them out. Why do the other Arab countries not take the Palestinians? Because they don't want the bullshit from Hamas and the nonsense that goes with it in their countries. Even the other Arab Muslim countries won't take them in. That should speak volumes. Volumes. He demanded there be more creation of a Palestinian state in Israel's doorstep. This after Hamas of Gaza invaded Israel and massacred 1,200 people. Biden has faced criticism on the left for not being more supportive of Hamas and the Palestinians. This is concerning the families.
This crisis began on October 7th with a massacre by a terrorist group called Hamas, as you all know. 1,200 innocent people, women and girls, men and boys, slaughtered after enduring sexual violence, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and 250 hostages taken. Here in this chamber tonight are families whose loved ones are still being held by Hamas. I pledge to all the families that we will not rest until we bring every one of your loved ones home. We
won't rest. What are you doing? There's nothing you can do. You can't play both sides of the street. Those are old enough to remember the Iranian hostage crisis. It was on Ted Koppel every single night, day 100, 282, and it went on for over a year. They had an high Israeli official, and they asked him, what do you do when there's hostages? How do you negotiate? He goes, we do not negotiate with terrorists, period. But some of your own people are going to be killed. And he said, yes, and it's sad. You cannot negotiate with terrorists. And that has been the Israeli practice for decades. For decades. There's nothing you can do as President of the United States, especially now after you've lost credibility throughout the Mideast, even for that F-up that you had in Afghanistan. Biden also promised to harness the power of AI to protect, blah, blah, blah. The funny part is what they didn't mention was there was a gentleman that stood up and hollered, I believe it was called the Abbey Bridge. That was the bridge that the 13 U.S. service members died in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And one of the 13 members that died, his father was in the audience and hollered out Marines, which his son was, at Abbey Bridge several times. And he was proceeded to be escorted out, and he was handcuffed and charged with a misdemeanor. Now, if they had any brains PR-wise, they would just release him, because there was a couple of hecklers when President Trump did his State of the Union address, and they escorted them out and then released them uncharged. Not these morons. Anybody that goes against us publicly, we will go after and put them in jail, especially a Gold Star father. We'll see what they do with this guy. If they had any brains, they release him. I listened to the speech, unfortunately. I probably got dumber listening to it. And as I get older, I can't afford to lose brain cells. And the fact of the matter is, it was bitter. It was decisive, pitting one side against another. The unity president, my ass. He was all over the place with his usual Biden gaffes. He does it so often, though nobody even pays attention anymore. It was ridiculous. God knows what they had to give him in order to get him through this. And he was delayed for a while because his presidential motorcade was being blocked by protesters, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine protesters. So that took a while, so he was late. It's incredible to me. The lies. The greatest threat to democracy since the Civil War is a lie. It's simply a lie. You know what a big threat to our democracy is? Secret FISA courts. Secret warrants. Getting people's cell phone records without a warrant. And I could go on and on and on. CCTV cameras everywhere. That's the biggest threat to our democracy. Way more than January 6th by far. Well, there it is, folks. What's your opinion? If those of you that were brave enough to sit through this entire thing, and now they're pressing Trump even further, or now more criminal stuff coming out of Arizona because they're failing in Atlanta, Georgia with the Fani Willis case. The clock is ticking, and November couldn't get here soon enough. We'll have to see how it turns out. Just like the Civil War, there's one direction it could go in or another direction. And as usual, it's up to the American people which direction you want us to go in. But if you make your choice to go vote, at least know the truth and make your vote accordingly. Until the next time, God bless, goodbye, and good luck.